possible. But, but it really was important to you, Sam, to have, you know, the idea of a continuous shot, which really puts the viewer into it, and that it's in real time. Would you say, you know, that it's that was important in terms of the story?
Yeah, that really came with the initial idea, and it was. I think it's important not to get too lost in the how, but the why, and that's what Roger and I spent a lot of time talking about. Yeah, faulty equipment, you know, the why is because you want an emotional connection with these characters, and because you want an immersive. You want to take an audience into a world that can seem dry and dusty. We didn't want to make a history lesson. We didn't want to make an eat your peas war movie, and we didn't want to make a movie that was just a sort of, you know, the cliche of the First World War, really, which is the brown mud and the trenches. We found a way to make this journey through many different layers, different atmospheres, different places, you know, orchards and farmhouses and fields, and to see the vastness of this landscape and the scale of the destruction of that generation, but through a tiny keyhole of just two men, to see the macro through the micro, as it were. And so what Roger and I talked about was, how do we best convey the emotion of the scene? How do we best convey how do we pull an audience, give them this feeling that they're being pulled through the movie rather than being presented with things? And only when we had decided what instinctively felt best emotionally did we then discuss, or rather Roger then had to work out how he would actually go about shooting it and on what rigs.
Yeah, can you talk about that, Roger? I happen to watch the featurette that's going to be, I believe, on HBO and things, but it's extraordinary. You're jumping on cars, you're jumping off of them, all in one shot.
Not me personally.
Well, your team, as it were. But when you first heard this idea, when you met with Sam, who you've worked with, I think three pictures, before, what was your reaction, and how did you feel you were going to be able to do it?
Well, obviously it was a shock when I looked at the first page of the script and it said, "Oh, this is imagined in one take." But then, you know, it was this. Sam wanted this immersive experience, and it was for a very deliberate reason. I obviously initially I was worried. Well, is that ostentatious? I don't. You know, what I do with my work, I try not to be noticeable. I want the audience to be totally absorbed in the story and the characters, and that what worried me about doing this. But we had lots of discussions about how the camera would move and how it wouldn't take the audience out of it. It drew the audience in. You know, that was the main thing. It wasn't about the technology and how we were going to do it. It was what we were going to do.
Yeah, and I got to tell you, 15 minutes. I knew the whole idea that it was one shot. But that's all I knew. And 15 minutes in, I totally forgot about it. This was an epic movie that had me right in the scene, however it was done, but it was the story I was following here, and not...
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what you're always trying to do.
Yeah.
In any film, it's just to totally absorb the audience in the story and not the technical challenges of something else. You work out, and I mean, I had a wonderful crew, there's loads of people involved, and it was a really amazing group effort. As George was saying, it was a big kind of circle of production.
What was the biggest challenge for you on this? You know, once you got into it and you looked
Shooting under grey skies.
The weather, really, we couldn't deal with sunshine because we needed continuity from moment to moment, and that meant that we had days, we knew we were going to have days where we wouldn't shoot anything at all, which, as anyone who's ever made a movie and can tell you how much every day costs, is a scary prospect. But we were lucky in the end, and also we had prepped a lot, and the actors were fantastic. So, you know, what could have been a nightmare, and some days were, you know, you've got a 7-minute take and someone makes a mistake after 6.5 minutes, and nothing in that take can be used. You have to go back and do it again. And that can drive you a little insane. And there were days when I thought, why have I done this to myself? But when you get it, it's like catching the big wave. You know, you want to do it again. even though it's a bit scary. And I think that everyone felt that same exhilaration, and the adrenaline of that kept them going to the next shot and the next shot and the next shot. So, you know, the most difficult things, though, were not technical things. I mean, they were not easy, those things, but a scene like Blake's death scene, which is 9 minutes, in which he has to be absolutely, everything has to be timed perfectly, from, you know, the props that come out of Blake's pocket to the barn roof that has to collapse on cue, to the embers that have to pass by Blake's face as he starts to lose consciousness. And yet within that, he has to give an incredibly truthful, emotional performance. And it's the combination of the two things that is complicated rather than just the technology.
Yeah. Does your theater, obviously very extensive experience in the theater, inform that? I mean, it is like once you're doing those long takes and things and all of that, it's like that.
Yeah, I mean, theatre is a long take. You know, I remember someone saying, "Isn't it amazing in Les Mis, the movie, that Anne Hathaway does that song in one take?" And I thought, well, unless I'm mistaken, I think they do the whole show in one take every night. So there is that part of it. It's like, well, it's not so strange to me, the idea of a 10-minute take. But what is strange is that you have to, within that, you have to factor in the camera, and that is a different, you know, it's a different thing. And you know, theatre, to state the obvious, you're looking at it from one perspective. This camera's constantly moving, and a scene like talking about Blake's death scene, the camera circles them. It circles them just at the right point. And the timing of that was an instinctive move on behalf of the camera operator, who was brilliant, along with the actors. The actors, you know, the boys had got so used to it after a certain point that they're aware of the camera purely out of instinct, kind of in a peripheral sense. So you get that wonderful thing of concentration without thought, which is, you know, when somebody's completely immersed and knows exactly where they are and where everybody else is, but you're not thinking about it. And that comes from rehearsal, and that's one of the things that you're taught in the theatre.